you're basically giving them the notion that you're old, you need help, hang this. Oh, you need a watch, you need a wearable. So every solution out in the market is sticking something on people. And they have to act on it. When somebody's fallen, they have to remember to press this button, right? And we thought that's not the way to go. How do you live your life like the way you live normally?
The startup investment landscape is changing, and world-class companies are being built outside of Silicon Valley. We find them, talk with them, and discuss the upside of investing in them. Welcome to Upside.
Woo!
Hello, and welcome to the Upside Podcast, the first podcast finding upside outside of Silicon Valley. I'm Eric Hornum, and I'm accompanied by my co-host, Mr. Blue Podcast Suite himself, Jay Klaus. Jay, how's it going?
You're really giving some sultry tones into this XLR.
Oh, it feels good.
Really embracing the XLR here.
Yeah, I'm getting into it. I'm in your ears.
Yeah, you are in there. We are in the Blue Studio Podcasting Suite here at CES. Eric and I are at CES this week as broadcast media partners with the event.
It's pretty exciting. It's pretty fun. We are talking to a lot of really cool companies. We're seeing a lot of really cool things. But right now, we are sitting in a suite by Blue Microphones, and we are on some equipment that is above and beyond anything we use.
Yeah. Longtime listeners of the show, you've probably noticed that our production quality has gotten better over the last several months. But we've been using the same equipment. We've just gotten better at the process. And the equipment we use is a Yeti microphone. Both Eric and I have been using the standard sort of entry-level Yeti microphone since the beginning of this podcast.
I just got a Yeti blackout microphone, which I really enjoy, to be honest.
Yeah, and functionally, is there a difference?
It makes me feel cooler.
Tyler over there, audio engineer. Functionally difference between the blackout and the regular? Didn't think so. So it's kind of like the holographic microphone.
I don't understand that relation, but sure.
You didn't collect Pokemon cards growing up?
Oh, holographic. Yeah. Oh, I did do that. Yeah. I actually had all of them except for Charizard, which my brother had. That was a big debate in the
It's like the holographic Charizard equivalent of the Yeti microphones.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's probably fair because it matches my boom, so my whole setup looks sick.
It does look better. I see Eric on Skype. He's got the pop filter now, so I can't quite see his whole face, which mostly I appreciate, but also sometimes it's harder to see when he's about to say something. We're learning here.
That's true. You could say we're getting older and we're aging as a podcast. Could you say that, Jay?
You could say we're aging as a podcast. I wouldn't say we're seniors yet, but that brings up today's guest, CareAlert. CareAlert is a device that looks after the well-being of seniors living independently. It allows caregivers to contact seniors via voice using an app. CareAlert contains no camera. So this tool, which we're talking about today, is an in-home device that allows the children of seniors to maintain care and visibility into the lives of their parents in a lot of cases, but elders, without invasively using cameras or forcing them into assisted living facilities.
Yeah, it's for I think it's called the sandwich generation. That's when you have to take care of both your parents and your children.
Interesting.
Have you ever heard that term before?
Never.
So it's happening to my parents right now. It's happening to my girlfriend's parents. I think it's happening to a lot of people our age and a little bit younger, where their parents are kind of hitting that 80s to 90s, and they're like, okay, I have to take care of this, but I also have to take care of my family life. So you're just kind of like spread very thin. And I think that this is a potential solution for that.
Yeah, it rings home to me. My grandparents, who have all since passed, but as I was growing up, my parents were the youngest of their siblings, and they were taking care of their mothers, is what I saw. And my grandmothers lived to be one in her mid-90s, and the other lived to be 100. Both of them went into assisted living. I really saw the toll that it took on my parents from a caregiving perspective, just thinking about how to make sure they're okay. I saw the guilt that they had in putting them into assisted living facilities, even when they could still care for themselves in most ways. So this makes some sense to me. Our guest today is Anand Krishnan. He's the co-founder and in charge of platform engineering for CareAlert. He's been an entrepreneur and technologist for over 20 years. He's built high-performing technology teams in North America, Europe, and Asia, and even founded a technology services company a renewable energy company, and an AI talent platform company. So he's been around the block.
A little bit different than the typical founder we have in Upside. Seems older, seems a little more experienced.
Yeah, I feel like that's a theme actually here at CES for a lot of the companies that just in our brief time here, we've walked around. It does seem like a bit of a more seasoned crowd, I guess I would say. Fewer consumer, Snapchat-esque apps and a lot more hardware, more capital-intensive businesses here at CES that we've seen so far. And Anand and his co-founder, Freydun, seem to fall into that category.
Yeah, I'd agree.
A couple more things. CareAlert, founded in 2016, based in Atlanta, Georgia, our second Atlanta company. And to this point, they've been self-funded. They have not raised any capital at this point, which I think is also speaking to the fact that they're more of a seasoned team and they've done this before. They have the ability to get things started before they go down the capital raise path.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that we'll talk about in the interview and hopefully look at a little bit more in the deal memo.
All right, so we're going to jump into the interview here with Anand. So if you guys have any thoughts as we're going through this episode in the interview or in the deal memo, be sure to tweet at us at UpsideFM or send us an email, hello@upside.fm.
Hey guys, wanted to cut in here real quick and let you know about something Jay and I have been getting ready behind the scenes in 2019. When we started this podcast, Jay and I said that you, the listener, would have an opportunity to learn in real time, to think like venture investors with us as we meet a wide variety of personalities and examine a wide range of industries. Well, now we're going to share something new, and it's a little different. This new idea is called The Update. It's a carefully curated quarterly publication of editorials, trends, and stories happening outside of Silicon Valley. Jay and I will be writing stories about what we're learning about on the podcast, have guest editorials on interesting topics, and share news and updates from our podcasts. In some cases, we may even share some exclusive content or first looks. Our goal is to stay at the cutting edge, and of course, bring you along with us. We're super excited about it and know you're going to love it. If you want to be the first to hear about our Q1 launch and subsequent letters, go to upside.fm/update to get on the mailing list.
Anand, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
We're excited to have you here. We're excited to be here at CES. We're looking out over Eureka Park, and it is pretty cool. But we like to start Upside, and we like to start every show with a history of the founders. So can you tell us about the history of Anand?
Sure. So I grew up in India, grew up in a very entrepreneurial family. My dad had several businesses. The most successful was his manufacturing business. At one point he had several thousand employees, lots of ups and downs, learned a lot. So I used to spend a lot of time in his business as a child. I started programming when I was in 8th grade. I built his first invoicing system. And so my interest in programming and technology started back then.
So in 8th grade, you were programming an invoicing system for a manufacturing company that had thousands of employees.
Yes.
And what year was that?
That was in 80. When was I in 8th grade?
Approximate's fine.
So I don't know, somewhere in 88? Yeah, I don't know.
That's crazy. I think in 8th grade, I was like, I don't know, what was I doing? What were you doing in 8th grade, Jay?
In 8th grade, I was trying really hard to figure out how to talk to women, girls, really.
Hey, you're still doing that.
that didn't go too well for me, so I resorted to banging on a keyboard. But yeah, we had the initial exposure to the BBC Micro computer, the Ataris, and things like that. And from there on, went to engineering, did my mechanical engineering because that's my, I come from a manufacturing family, so had to do mechanical.
Of course, yeah.
And then I taught myself how to program all this while. Then I, based on my dad's advice, he said, you have to go learn how to run big companies before you run something. So go work for a large corporation, learn the processes and techniques. So I ended up at IBM for 18 years. I thought of being there for a few years so I can learn and get out, but then got sucked in, got blue washed all the way. So that's, and then after several years, pretty good growth pattern in IBM, and then wanted to help smaller companies, similar to how my experiences were, past life experiences, to take small companies, grow them, and help them with some of the techniques and experiences that I've gained by applying technology relevant to the business. So I always took a very business-focused approach to technology, not sticking technology and figuring out how to use it in the business. And so I started helping companies that are $2 to $5 million companies implement technology, help them scale and grow using technology. several of my clients. I have now grown from a $2 million corporation to my most recent client raised $50 million with close to a $500 million valuation, right? So I've been through them with them for all this while. I've done that with 4 or 5 of my clients. In the process of doing that, we ended up identifying common problems that I've seen across all these clients, and we created products. Some successful, some not successful. And then when my co-founder for Census called me one day and said, "Look, I'm frustrated because I was trying to reach my mother-in-law, and I had to pull my hair out, eventually drive 2.5 hours, go just to find out that she's just taking a nap on the couch.
Yep.
Everything was perfectly fine." And I said, "Sounds like something I've been through several times." So I said, "What do we want to do about it?" And then we ended up with Sensacall, and then we looked at the market, looked at some of the problems, and applied some of our experiences, and here we are.
Take me back to that time when you have clients. How does that evolve? So you're at IBM, all of a sudden you have clients that you're helping. Is that a side project? Is that a side consulting gig?
So through the course of IBM, I obviously had a lot of network that I built out. Some of those people quit to start these companies, and then they call me back to say, "Hey, is this something that you want to help us with?" And then eventually I figured that it's a good time to transition and go out on my own. That's when I left IBM, and I said, "Look, if I don't do it now, I'll possibly regret it if I do it, 10 years from now. So it's better I take that risk now." So I jumped into it 5 years ago and never been happier.
That timeline, when about was that?
That was in 2015.
You might have said this and I might have missed it. When did you come to the United States from India?
So I came to the United States in 98. So I came here through an IBM partner for a client. I was supposed to be here for 2 weeks. And here we are. And then one of the IBM business partners said that, "Look, I don't think you need to go back. I want you here." And I ended up here. Like I said, it was supposed to be, my external gig for working for other companies was supposed to be a period of time learning how things are done in the modern world, not through the processes that my dad had put together. So that's, and then 18 years later, here we are. So.
Was there ever an expectation from your family that you'd come back to India and take over what your dad had started?
Not really, right? So the advice that I always got from both my dad, again, I look up to my dad and my grandparents. They've always told me, you have to do what is right for you in the context of the time you are in, right? So at the time when our family business started, that was the right thing for him to do. So I had all the freedom to do it. So there was no expectations other than do well.
That's great. So when you went out on your own and started doing consulting, is that Sensor's Call or was that a separate company?
That was another company called ThinkBridge. So we did mostly management consulting with a technology bias. So we wanted to be the McKinsey for small companies. I worked with a lot of McKinsey colleagues, so took some of those ideas and built a smaller, more affordable McKinsey for small businesses.
So how small of businesses, right? Because at some level, a business is so small that they just don't even have money to pay a
Right,
McKinsey.
no, so that's why I had this market that was very clear. It was 2 million and above was my target market, and they needed to have a scalable business model, right, that I would invest time in. And almost every one of my clients, I ended up with a non-cash component, which was the equity in the company, right? So I said, look, if I'm going to be going into this with you, if it's a very transactional relationship, which is, hey, here's 12 hours, pay me for it, that's all I'll put into it. So if I really like what you're doing and I want to be a part of it for the long term, then I want to be deeply embedded in it. That's why every one of my clients that I acquired back in late 2014, 2015 timeframe are still with me, and I'm sure they're still happy with me.
What was your business development strategy for that? How did you meet those clients?
The first 2 clients I met through my network that I'd built over time, through my friend, my colleague who I went to school with. He's always been in startups and he's always been in that space. He never went to corporate. So through that network, we got hold of this. Some of them had left IBM before and gone on to found these companies. So it's all a mix of that. As anyone will tell you, however structured your business development methodology is, in the end, you end up with clients who are sticky only, if they have come through word of mouth, referrals and stuff like that, right? So that's kind of my story too, in terms of how I got.
Yeah, I was just wondering if that IBM sort of credential was what was bringing so many people to you, or if you started with relationships
No,
the way
it
so many.
certainly did, right? It certainly did. There is some valuation and credibility to what I did. So that definitely helped. But it only helps getting your foot in the door. But then after that, you got to show your value.
You have to deliver.
Right. If you don't show your value and if you don't believe in true value creation, people won't see it. So when we put a technology solution in, we always look at it from what's the return you're getting out of it, and we quantify it, right? I'm a big proponent of the OKR methodology, if you've heard of it, right? It's the objectives and key results. So I use that all the time. So because something that's qualitative and then something that's quantitative. So that's the model I've used.
How many clients did you have in the period when you started ThinkBridge until the time Sensors Call became your new kind of primary?
I had about 7 clients.
7 clients. So you kind of had like a mini venture portfolio almost if you had equity in most of those.
Actually, I do, yes. So most of the 2 industries that really, I love as an industry vertical is energy and staffing and recruiting, right? Basically talent acquisition. So in talent acquisition, we ended up with a company called JavaTalks, which is pretty creative. They were creating a voice component for their resume, right? So you can actually send automated interviews. So I told them, hey, you know what? I'll build this for you. I have people who can build it. So I got the product built, and I have stake in the company. And it's growing. I mean, we are getting the Domino franchise, Nissan, a lot of large clients like that, and so that's growing. So like that, in every one of our there's another company out of Los Angeles, which is one of the largest recruitment process outsourcing companies. We built their entire platform. We own a good portion of the IP, and we overlaid their thought leadership onto the platform. So we kind of co-own that. So there's a lot of opportunities like that we've built over a period of time. We have an energy billing platform that we own stake in that does retail energy billing. So we kind of have you're right, it's sort of a mini enterprises that we own, and we are fully vested in it because it's not transactional.
Right. So are you still pursuing ThinkBridge, or is ThinkBridge kind of this legacy asset that may yield some dividends in the future?
Each one of these individual entities has a owner/co-owner that runs that entity. So the utility billing software is run by my business partner and co-founder and colleague who I went to school with back home in India. And then the other businesses are being run by people who we hired, and they've been with us for several years. They are running those things for us. And I'm involved at a high level, make sure everything looks okay. And I'm still, every quarter, we have quarterly strategy sessions that I run with those clients, and I still do those things. Yep.
So you want to transition to Sensors Call?
Yeah, I'd like to hear about that. First of all, what is Sensors Call, which is the parent company of CareAlert, which we'll be talking about today?
Sensors Call it came about as a way to use sensor technology to identify events and analyze and act on events based on the data that's coming from sensors, right? So when Fredun, my co-founder, and I were looking at it initially, along with our other co-founders, we were looking at water flow monitors, right? Measuring water flow. And then we looked at, measuring air quality. And then we ended up talking about, we measure all these things, but unless somebody acts on it, it's not going to do much. We're just going to be pumping more data at people's faces. Here's a fancy dashboard. Here's there's a lot of people doing it. And then one day, Fredun called me after he had this crazy experience trying to get a hold of his mother-in-law, and he could not. It's a very simple problem, and she didn't want to answer the phone. He had previously installed cameras in her house, which she didn't like, and then, it's almost bothersome for you to keep calling them saying, are you okay? Are you okay? And it's like, yeah, I'm okay, right? Why are you bothering me? And he said, look, I think I found the market, right? That this whole concept of using sensors without being intrusive and take technology away from people instead of sticking it in their face all the time.
So it sounds like you guys identified a technology capability with the sensors and what you could pull in and analyze and people could act on, but you're looking for a use case.
Right.
And at this point, Fredun had this experience with his mother-in-law and said, you know what, here's a use case, let's go after that. And so CareAlert became a branded product around that.
So we created CareAlert, which is a very focused market and a product that is focused towards the elder care market, right? And then when we thought deeply about it, our goal was to not market that to the seniors because I don't want to throw more technology at seniors, right? So who are the buyers? So we looked at the buyers and we said they are the caretakers or the children of these people who actually are the ones who are worried and cannot answer a simple question. Is my mom okay? Is my dad doing all right? Did he come back from a walk? These very basic questions that keeps bugging and nagging them while they're taking care of their kids. So it's called the sandwich generation, if you've heard of that term.
Mm-hmm.
So we said that's our market. This is where we can make technology useful. And, we almost took a very, I don't know what to call it, but, there's so much technology. I can click a button and get food delivered. I can get, frivolous things delivered. Why can't I know how my parents are doing? It's a very simple problem to solve. And so that's how we ended up with CareAlert as a product. The reason we put CareAlert as a product is because we have so many other use cases that we'll potentially do down the line. But right now, this is one thing we're focusing on.
Before we dive into the product, which I think is where we're going next.
Yeah.
I'm getting closer to the microphone.
Jay's like sneaking up on the mic. He loves his product questions.
Yeah.
Before we dive into that, you mentioned more use cases. Why sensors? Why is that the place to start for you?
Yeah, so if you look at technology as itself, right, there's a lot of places where technology makes you do a lot of work, right? What did you just do?
Setting this. For those at home, Anand is pointing to our podcasting setup here with the Focusrite recorder, which is all new equipment to me, and he watched me learn it for the first time.
Right, and if you see, they give you a new watch, and then you got to fumble through it. And you talk about user experience. Just how do you take those technologies and make it useful in your daily lives without having to wrestle with it, right? And I've seen this throughout my career, right? We stick a software product in and the users just don't need it, and we still force them to use it, right? Yeah, you need a watch, you need a phone, you need a television, you need an Apple TV, you need a Roku box. It's like, for what, right? So we looked at sensors and said, look, sensors are unique, ubiquitous things that's going to be all over the place. How do you place them appropriately to get what you need and accomplish very basic things that you're struggling with? How do you solve real basic problems? I'm not trying to solve world hunger, right? I'm trying to solve very simple problem in a segment of the market that is growing at 10,000 seniors a day. And then as they age, there's abnormal things happening. The people move their parents from their home where they're comfortable into assisted living facilities simply because the kids are not comfortable with their parents living on their own. They're very well capable of. So we thought if you take sensors and other than short of you physically being there and being convinced that everything looks good, sensors can replace that. And that's why we started with sensors as the way to go.
I think about the commercial that I saw so many times growing up of Life Alert, I've fallen and I can't get up.
Right, exactly, right?
And this is sort of like a much smarter evolution and holistic view into the life of your mom, of your dad.
I wouldn't call it smarter, right? Because it's a very simple solution. Because the problem is, if you look at people, give them CareAlert, you're basically giving them the notion that you're old, you need help, hang this. Oh, you need a watch, you need a wearable. So every solution out in the market is sticking something on people. And they have to act on it. When somebody's fallen, they have to remember to press this button, right? And we thought that's not the way to go. How do you live your life like the way you live normally? And how do you do that, right? That's. And then if you look at it, the other thing we put in the product or took out of the product is cameras. Every solution out there has a camera that keeps watching you, right? And to older people, privacy it's a aspect of their dignity that you're taking it, right? And that's for anybody. I mean, nobody likes cameras watching you all the time.
I read on the Sensors Call website, there's a story about how your co-founder, Freydun, had this experience with his mother-in-law, and it mentioned the cameras, the initial iteration of the cameras, and how that anyone who's read the book 1984 would see why that's a problem. Can you, even though it's anecdotal in this case, can you talk more about her response to the camera's effort of this and what that meant to her to be watched?
So it's classic, right? That's one use case. We've had many use cases that I've interviewed. My wife's uncle who lives, who's about the same age group. Everybody has the common thing that when I have a camera looking at me, I feel like I'm not myself. I just feel very conscious of everything I'm doing. just kicking up my leg and putting on top of my, my ottoman is like, okay, somebody's watching me, right? Even though that's not the intention, that's what happens, right? And so the reaction was, I don't like it. I don't want the camera. I'd rather be unsafe than have a camera in my house, right? You put the camera outside for people, so I can know who's coming in because they're unwanted people.
We never want ourselves watched.
Exactly.
We want to watch everybody else, but we don't want ourselves
that's
to be watched.
That's right? So and of course, that's the whole Facebook mindset. I want to keep snooping into what people, it's, so that was the reaction. Basically, I don't want this. Take it out.
Yeah, it's so true that like that human nature aspect, because I think it's one of the reasons I like podcasting is that people tend to be more open on a podcast than they are on a like video interview or something. Because I think that there is something to be said for having your face be like the people who can go on the news and do all that are incredible. I couldn't do it, but they're incredible. So this whole idea of like a minimally invasive technology, that's what I'm going to call it.
Yeah.
Can you tell me how that works for CareAlert? Like I have the idea. Give me like a little bit of depth.
Right. So what it does is there are different data points in your living conditions that are available, right? And if you have a way to collect that and assess it and analyze it, you will be able to conclude on the events that are happening around you. For example, if you're sitting here and you're hearing the noise, your brain can tell you that, looks like this person is sitting in a hall that is big enough with some chatter in the back, and the temperature is sort of cold, so I probably need something to wear. So all these interpretive actions that your brain takes, we have tried to embed into the CareAlert product. So what it does is it measures 8 different parameters from temperature, humidity, air quality, motion, to sound, to all of that, right? So it measures those 8 different parameters. And if you ask me, why did I come up with 8? Those were the sensors we thought made the most sense that we could pack into a simple product that vanishes into the house.
And was that set of 8, was that the MVP first version of CareAlert?
That's right. Again, my MVP is not the minimum viable product. It's the most valuable product, right? A minimum viable product is pretty much useless in my mind. But yeah, so that's how I look at it. But yes, it's valuable enough. Over a period of time, I can make this device using over-the-air software updates. In 2 years, my device will be a lot more smarter than it was on the day I installed it, with those 8 sensors, right? And so we collect data from those 8 sensors, use a cascading set of algorithms that put the data together. So I start with the motion sensor, detect motion. Now I detected motion for someone going into a room. Now how do I know they're still in the room? Did they jump out of the window or what happened? I detect presence in the room by adding my air quality sensor on top of it, because the air quality varies dramatically when a person is in the room. So I put data together and say, the person entered the room, they're in the room. And they stayed in the room for X amount of time. Oh, by the way, they went to the bathroom. By the way, they flushed the toilet, right? So I can figure all of these things out just without a camera, just by measuring these sensory things that is happening around everybody.
And how is that shown then to the user, the customer, the son, daughter, grandson, granddaughter? Are they getting constant updates, or are they just given alerts?
Exactly. So we introduced this notion when we came up with the product. We said that we want to be a completely non-intrusive to both the caretaker and to the person who's being cared for. Nobody should even know that the technology exists. It should just fade away into the house. You have windows in the house. Does anybody talk about windows? Does anybody talk about switches in the house? They flip a switch and electricity, the light turns on.
My dad's got a big thing for switches.
Yeah.
So.
No, there may be people who are geeks like that, right? But nobody thinks about how electricity shows up in your house and what's my energy consumption, and nobody cares. I need my light on, please turn it on. So that's basically the concept behind it, right? So we came up with this idea of no news is good news, right? So the caretakers know that, look, I haven't received any notification, so my mom's going about her daily work, or my dad's doing whatever he's supposed to do. If the system detects any anomalies or breakages in the pattern, right? So, for example, your mom usually goes to sleep at 9 in the evening and wakes up at 6:45. on that, and then on that day, and maybe wakes up once at night to go to the bathroom. One night she goes to the bathroom 5 times, and because the reason is we can detect flushes. So we have a microphone, but it doesn't record voice; it records sounds, and we run it through a sound classification algorithm that can tell what sound it is. So flushing is something that we have refined really well, and we can tell flush. We can tell shower based on sound and humidity together, because the humidity in the bathroom goes up. Only when there's an anomaly or a breakage in the pattern that says, look, your mom woke up like 5 times, you might want to ask her what's going on. And then we said, how do you make it even more easy? So we said, let's put a speaker and let's make it an intercom where the caretaker can go to the app, click, and say, Mom, is everything okay? So what happens is the whole notion of identify and act on it without being intrusive or being bugged all the time. I hate notifications on my phone. So that's what it is. That's how we came about.
And so these are pretty high stakes anomalies, right? So anytime there's an anomaly, you're probably sending some sort of communication to the caretaker. Is that a push notification? Is that text message?
Yes. So it is a push notification. They can also look at it in the app and get a full feed of what's going on. Depends on what. So now, instead of calling their mom and dropping in on their mom every day, they obsessively look at like Facebook feed. They obsessively scroll through their feed and say, oh, my mom woke up. They woke up, went to the kitchen and things like that. So it happens through all those mediums. But the threshold of how often and how sensitive it'll be, like, so for the first 7 to 8 days when you install the system, it's still learning. So it freaks out at everything, right? Over a period of time, it tones down and it measures and learns and says, look, these seem like normal patterns. I don't have to freak out, right? And that's why we are not positioning it as a medical device. We are positioning it as a well-being monitor that says, look, did your mom go out today? Okay, for the last 5 days, she's never stepped out of the house. Social interaction is a big indicator of quality of life, not diet, not exercise. For anybody over 60, social interaction. So basically that's we try to notify. The less intrusive or obtrusive we are, that's our goal.
What are some of like the spatial limitations here? Because it sounds like right now there's only one per unit, or at least that's what we've been talking about. Can there be multiple?
No. So what we do is we want to use triangulation techniques, and we want to increase our learning ability and the probability of it predicting the right event occurring. So we typically recommend putting at least 2, which is one in the bedroom and one in the bathroom, where most of the anomalies occur there, right? What we have come up with so far is for a 2,000 square foot unit or a house, you need about 3. One is in the bedroom, one is in the bathroom, and one is in the living area where they go about their lives, right? And then we collect all these 3, talk to each other, and it basically knows that you went from the living room to the bedroom at this time because it sensed motion from one to another. So it's like, multiple things looking at it and taking care of you, basically.
How long have you guys been in market with this?
So we're not in market. So we started this 2 years ago. And then we've been experimenting, refining. We've put about 25 units in different places. We are learning, refining our algorithms. Our software platform is ready. Our app is ready. Our first batch of 100 is going to come out in first week of February. It's going to go out into the market. And then our production ramp up is 100, then 500, and then 1,000, and then 10,000, and it's going to go on for this. So throughout this year, we're going to be pushing. We have an initial set of beta users who have signed up. That's where we are. We are not in market yet. We are pre-alpha.
So whenever there's something in, you guys are calling it well-being, or just medicine in general, for me, it's like health, medicine, whatever, that whole field. And there's some sort of signaling or like symptom identification, which this kind of falls into. I think that statistically there's false negatives and false positives, right? So if I'm a caretaker and I get an alert, there's a chance that alert didn't actually matter. But there's also a chance if I don't get an alert that there should have been an alert. So how do you guys refine your algorithms to make and how do you think about the difference in those 2 types of errors? Like, where's your sensitivities lie?
So we basically take a very cautionary approach, which means if there is any anomaly, we try to cascade it to multiple decision trees. So we have a decision tree algorithm that goes down the decision tree where we basically manipulate the threshold to say, is this good or bad? So we have a decision tree algorithm that we use. We continue to refine it. There's obviously cases where it finds out that there's it really freaked out at nothing, right? Simply because a pet showed up at home, right?
But that's acceptable at least.
And so what we do is we take a more, proactive, cautionary approach, and then our next step is to take calculated risks, right? So based on the decision tree, we are not there yet. So our next evolution of the algorithm is to take calculated risk that says, look, I'm going to take this risk as if it is not an anomaly. Here's why. At any point, the caregiver can still go and look at it to see, hey, yesterday, why didn't my mom use the bathroom at all? They can say, oh, you know what? There was a case where we knew somebody who ended up in the hospital because they were dehydrated. And the only way they found out was they were delirious on the phone and they were talking, they were incoherent on the phone. Had they known that they have never used the bathroom, never had a sip of water for 4 days, hence never used the bathroom, it would have been proactive. But then when they went to the doctor, they were able to look at the feed and say, look, they never used the bathroom for this many days. So the doctor immediately was able to say dehydration.
How straightforward? So it sounds like the caretaker has a feed of just about all the things that you guys are registering. They get notifications when you guys decide, like, this is something you should be proactively prompted about. I'm assuming sometime in the immediate future or down the line, you might give the caretaker some sort of like threshold of like how sensitive they want to hear those notifications. What is the simplicity in the messaging to the caretaker? Like, are you saying the barometric pressure is this and they have to figure out what that means? Or are you saying like, this is the flush, this is when she got a drink of water?
So again, we stick with our principle, which is take technology out of people's hands and make it ubiquitous, but don't make it in their face all the time. Like people stare at their phones all the time. You don't need to. So we're keeping in line with that philosophy. We will give you as much information as you want. So our app, if you look at it, it'll give you fancy graphs. It'll give you everything that you need. You don't really need to consume any of that, right?
Yeah.
But if you're a geek, if you want it, we will give you everything, full transparency, right? We'll give you an online portal that you can look at it. You can go look at our app. You can look at everything that you want. What you do with that is you can choose just to say, whoa, this is just too much stuff for me. I don't even know why we are measuring pressure. If you look at a weather app, okay, look at the Weather Channel app. I just want to know if I want to wear a jacket or no. I don't want 50,000 parameters. I'm not a scientist. I'm not trying to become a scientist here. So weather is a good example I give everyone. It's just overcomplicated in my mind. I don't know if you guys feel that way.
I really need to know the dew point every morning. It's very important.
Exactly. That's exactly my point, right? So, and how much it's going to, and it's never accurate. Think about it. It's never accurate, right? So still there's too much drama behind it. So we're trying to, again, I don't know how much we can achieve, but our goal is, again, take technology out of people's hands, give them what they need to take action on, and go away.
This pre-alpha phase of having it in 25 different homes, what are some of the things you've learned, either that you've validated? I want to hear that, but I especially want to hear what surprised you that you learned from these early users.
So good, right? So we originally thought the first thing we learned was we thought we had to layer in multiple sensor data to arrive at conclusions. Example, we thought we needed motion, light, sound, were the three things we thought we needed to find out if people walked into a room. What we ended up finding out, right, you don't need to overcomplicate it. All you need is a motion sensor. And oh, by the way, air quality changes dramatically. So we just need to use those two and not complicate it with 7 other sensors. If you go to the bathroom, you can simply use humidity to show, are they showering or are they done showering, right? When we originally went in, we said, we will basically say if they turn the light on, if the light sensor gets kicked in, if the motion sensor kicks in, if the humidity kicks. We were just complicating things. So the thing we learned was it helped us simplify our algorithms by saying, look, with this one sensor, 2 sensors, we can get even better calibration of data than we would with 8 sensors, right? Now we are redoing our algorithms to basically use. So we created this composite wellness measure, which was the equation was unbelievably complicated, right? And it's prone to errors. Anything complicated is prone to errors. So that false positive is going to show up more, and we'll be, I don't have any hair to pull out of my head, but but anyway. So the thing is, the whole idea, that's one thing we learned, is you can just use very basic data to conclude and tell people, are they up and about? Yes or no. That's one thing. The second thing that really stood out, that came as a huge surprise, was the biggest feature that everyone loves, not all these measurements and blah, 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 is this whole idea that they can actually talk to them used through the intercom feature. Like majority of the survey we did and the people we talked to, I would just buy it just for that intercom.
Wow.
Is the mechanism of that almost like a walkie-talkie? Like, is there a button in the app that you hold
Yeah,
down?
exactly. You hold down talk and say, hey, mom, what happened? You haven't woken up yet?
And in the elder's home, these plug directly into an outlet.
Into an outlet, yes.
And so you'd have 3 of those: bedroom, bathroom, living area. If I'm speaking into the intercom, it's coming out of that same unit in the outlet.
Yes, exactly. There's a speaker in that, and it plays from all three units.
And so how do I, as the elder, answer that? Do I just speak off into space and it picks that up?
Yes, exactly. Right. So that's what it does. So if there is a response, and like I said, we don't record the sounds. If there is a response, it's a human voice response, which means okay, somebody in the house is responding, so there is some action. Now we can look at other things, right? You can send someone over. You can you can take a bunch of actions by doing that. For example, that is one feature. The second thing that came out is and so here's how it came about. So you're going to use that feature to simply remind their mom, take your medication. It's time. So what did we do? We said, this is where technology can help. Just go add scheduled reminders and make your grandkids record saying, Nana, take your medication.
That's amazing.
And so
That's really
what we did was, now they're being psychologically threatened to make sure they take their medication because their little grandchild is saying that, right? And so now you don't even have to speak. So those things came out as like surprises to us that we never anticipated when we put it out in the market. And so 3 features that stood out: medication reminders, intercom, tell me if they're up and about. That's it.
One real quick question, piggybacking on something you had already asked. Something that blows my mind about human behavior is something that we didn't have a day ago. We can become overly dependent on the next day and then blame when it doesn't operate exactly how we want. So to his point of false negatives, if someone's really depending on CareAlert and something happens that they didn't get a push notification for but turned out to be one of those anomalies that was an issue, what type of liability do you guys have in that situation?
So that's something that keeps us up at night all the time, because people misinterpret our product as a mission critical product. And that's why one of the disclaimers we have is it is not, right? We ask people, what happens if you lose your phone? Oh, my life stopped. Really? Has it stopped? Not really.
Not really.
Right? So we differentiate between a need and a want. So one is, we tell our customers or the market that, look, it's just like a wearable, just like a Fitbit, just like your phone. It's another device that just does things by itself that's a lot more valuable to you that you don't have to do anything with. And it's an extra piece of information that lets you have your peace of mind. If you don't trust it, you still have to do something. Like you want to drive up there every morning, by all means do it. And it's not a medical device. It doesn't do fall detection. It can potentially predict a fall, but it won't tell you that. Eventually, maybe 2-3 years from now, as our algorithms get better, as sensors get better, we put AI on chip, onboard AI that can analyze in an instance what's going on. The liability comes down. But until such time, we just are positioning it as a product that is just like Alexa. Is it a mission critical app? No. But over a period of time, if they can't ask Alexa, what's the time? So it is a challenge. I mean, I don't think we have fully solved it, but that's something that we think about all the time.
It's funny because as you were describing the product, I kept on thinking in my head about the Alexa ecosystem, which is the Echo and the Dots and kind of around the house. But like you said, it's not there yet. I mean, you really can't even ask Alexa what the capital of Ethiopia is. I don't think she knows off the top of her head. So another thing you mentioned was fall detection. So I have 2 grandparents who are in their 90s, one of them just passed away, and then my girlfriend's grandma's in her 90s, and all 3 of them have experienced falls. And it is a really big issue when you fall, especially when you're in your 80s or your 90s. The other one is hydration, which we already covered. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about the idea of fall detection and prediction in the case of CareAlert. And you said it doesn't do this, but you said it also could do this.
Yeah, so the way we would like to talk about it is it can deduce based on data that these sensors provide that there could be a potential fall event. For example, my top motion sensor detected and the one at the bottom detected at the same time a lateral movement, a vertical movement that basically happened real fast, and the sound detected a thud, and the accelerometer experienced heavy gyrations in the readings. I can put all those three together and say potential fall, but I can't really tell. I can't for sure tell you this person fell down. It could be that they dropped a heavy book,
Right.
right? Or they picked up a pet and the pet jumped from their arms down and it detected something. So we can, just like everything else that we deduce based on sensor data, this basically is also another thing that you can deduce based on that. Like, for example, can I detect if there is a car in the garage or not? Is something we are thinking about, right? How do you do that? I mean, it's an easy problem to have solved, but so do we stick one and say car?
Yeah, just a fourth sensor in the garage.
Yeah, so you don't know. So things like that, right? We can always deduce that the car's here, there's no motion in the house, which means something is wrong because they should have been moving about at this time. Or if there's no motion in the house at some given period in time, I can sense if the car is now I can tell, looks like they left the house, so that's why there's no motion, so don't freak out. So there's deduction like that.
Yeah. Let's say I walk into a senior's house who has CareAlert right now, and they're seniors, so they still have a big encyclopedia shelf. I pull off an encyclopedia, I drop it on the ground. I'm their caretaker. What do I see on my phone?
So you would say some abnormal sound has been detected, and it'll just tell you that, and it'll also show that you might want to look at these other things. Have they moved since that thud happened? Did the motion sensor in the other room pick up any motion?
Do these seniors tend to have smartphones themselves?
They do, right? So at least in the people that we know, my family, Fredun's family, our other co-founders' families, they all have phones. They don't charge it, right? Fredun gives this example. I bought her a landline and I stuck with it. She never hangs it up.
I love that this device is not phone specific for the seniors. I'm wondering, I'm sure it's going to be a trend that as people age, they will have phones, continue to have phones. Can you triangulate with the phone also with the sensor data? Be like, okay, that thud happened, but also like the accelerometer in the phone went off, and use that data?
Oh yeah, absolutely, right. So we can use what we call connected sensors. So we have embedded sensors in the device in CareAlert, and we can also piggyback off of connected sensors, right? So our hypothesis is sticking different sensors throughout the house is not the way to go, right? There's a door sensor, there is a refrigerator open close sensor, there is a pressure mat, there's a gate sensor. There's too many sensors out there. Eventually, maybe that all gets embedded in the house. But in the event that those sensors exist, that's valuable data, and we want to be able to use those ecosystem of sensors, whatever is available. It may be a phone, and again, my prediction, this is Anand saying what's going to happen is nobody's going to have a phone in about 5 years. This device won't exist the way it is right now, the form factor, right? It's going to be in your ears, or it's going to be a projected vision, whatever. So yes, those connected sensors, we will piggyback off of that. We'll connect to Alexa, Google Home, HomeKit. We connect to all of that, right?
I was just going to say, there's got to be a booth here somewhere that has the
Yes.
future of phones.
Yeah,
We'll go find it. What doesn't CareAlert do well?
A lot of things, right? It's still, the way I describe it is it's probably an infant right now. So it does some things really well. It's unbiased. It kind of can do what it's supposed to do. But there's a lot it probably doesn't do because and there are always gotchas when you roll it out to more homes. Things it doesn't do is if there's too many sounds. For example, I like to take everything to India and experiment, right? It would miserably fail there simply because there's too much of noise. There's always a lot of ambient sound. The temperatures are more external than internal, right? Houses don't typically have climate control, so it's always biased based on the external. So there's things like that we don't know what will happen. A recent use case that we think we're struggling with, not struggling, but is something that we're really wrestling with is, hey, there's 3 of my in-laws and parents and all of them, they live out somewhere in LA and they don't have Wi-Fi, they don't have internet. If they need to use internet, they come over to my house and use it. Your device is useless because it needs Wi-Fi to do everything. We will stick in a cellular service. It's coming in the next model. But That's a problem, right? So those are some of the challenges that we have to think about, right?
And how strong of a signal strength would that Wi-Fi need to be? Does it need to be a strong connection too?
It should be a decent whatever. So the way I would calibrate it is if a Ring doorbell can work, that's sufficient.
I wanna transition a little bit. You guys are obviously putting a lot of your time into developing this. So how do you guys see this opportunity? How big is it, and why have you chosen to spend your time on this in particular?
So it's something that matters to us, right? We're all going to get old. I have aging parents, I have aging relatives, and the constant thing we hear is, how do you take care of them without intruding on their privacy at all times and not bothering them all the time? At the same time, knowing everything is okay and go about your life, right? So it's kind of close to as close and as real as it gets to a technology solution for a real problem, other than world hunger, right?
We already said we're not solving that.
Yeah, so we already said that, right? So what I'm saying is it's so real, at least in our minds, that it's a fantastic problem to be solved, and it's one of the best applications of technology out there. And that's why we wanted to spend more time. And this whole market of aging is already a huge problem. When I speak to my friends and family, who are in Europe, I talk to some of my colleagues from Japan. This is a real problem, and if you look at the current solutions out there, I'm not saying ours is our best solution, but it's way better than what is out there today is how we look at it, because there's medical monitoring. Everybody has things after everything has happened. They've already fallen and broken their back. Now they can't, right? And then they move their parents to all these weird places that they don't want to live in. And they should live their last stages of their life happily in their homes where they're comfortable. So that's really close to my heart, simply, to be very cliche about what I'm saying. So that's why we spend our time on this. Like, for example, my wife's dad passed away, and he didn't pass away happy. He was really struggled, in the last few stages, and it shouldn't happen. So it's important, and given where we spend my time for the next 5 years or 8 years, this is a space that is necessary. This may not be the eventual solution. It may end up being something else, but at least it'll get us on the path to get there. And so, that's why we spend our time on this.
What's the pricing of this? Because it's something that's universally, as you just laid out, universally demanded is elder care. How do you guys price something that's universally demanded?
So our pricing is pretty straightforward, right? We look at our costs, add a margin on top of it, figure out what we do. So right now we are priced it at $149 per unit. If you buy a pack of 3, that drops down to $119 per unit, and if you buy a 5-pack, it drops to $99 per unit multiplied by 5. So that's our pricing. We want to add a subscription pricing to it, not a monitoring fee, but basically for us to be able to push updates to the device so it becomes more smarter as we learn more and publish more updates to the device. And that's something that in year 1, we are not planning to do any subscription, but from year 2, potentially to make the device, to continuously upgrade the device. Like Fredun always likes to say, it's like a Tesla model, right? You buy a car and it's not great on day 1, but on day 360, it's a way better car than it was when you bought it. That's our model.
So that model is predicated on the underlying technology being able to handle a future model 4, 5, 6 years down the road. We've talked a little bit about sensor technology. We haven't really discussed how fast it's developing. Yep. Is sensor technology developing in line with Murphy's Law, where it's doubling every 6 months, or is it way slower?
Right. So I haven't done a whole lot of research on that, but basically what I can tell you is PIR sensors or motion sensors have been around for years. There's nothing new. There are night lights, so you just walk past it turns on. Has it become significantly different? Yeah, it's improving, right? Which means it could detect a certain cone of angle of motion. Now it can detect a wider. Now there's other technologies. You don't need PIR sensors. You can use radar. You can use Wi-Fi to detect presence in the room. So there are other forms of sensors showing up, but the sensors that we have embedded in the device are not rapidly changing. So we think these sensors have a lifespan of at least 3 years before they become obsolete. You can still use an iPhone 6 as efficiently as you would an iPhone 10 for 90% of the normal use, right? Do I really need my face to be the password? No, right? Again, you use technology so that it's useful. In that angle, if you keep that philosophy, it's not growing as fast. So that's
So I buy one of these units for whether it's a bundled price or whether it's a one-off unit. And that could just be my cost if I didn't do whatever the subscription model is, right? I just have that for until the thing dies, which I would expect is like takes a really long time. How does that play with like the app? The app, is that just a free pairing with that cost? The app is free?
Yeah, the app's free, right? So you download the app. We use this thing called Smart Config, and you just put in your Wi-Fi password on a screen, and it automatically pushes the password to the device, right? Yes, so the app is free. You just download it from the App Store.
So you guys, you're probably storing tons and tons of data, right? So it would seem to me that might, your costs might scale faster than the unit cost that you're selling to somebody.
True. So are you asking how we are planning to address it? What's our
How do you-
architecture? Yeah.
Why the per unit pricing versus, have a subscription out of the box just for that cost alone?
So for entering the market, we wanted to have a low barrier, and that's, again, we are priced very differently than a medical device. A medical device is typically, $29, $30 a month, and it's a monitoring fee and a bunch. So we are trying to reduce the barriers so people would buy it and make it easy for people to put it in. Second, in year one, we want to refine the product and our algorithms to such an extent. So in a way, they are helping us, right? In terms of how we manage our costs, yes, it'll eat into our margins a little bit, but storage is really cheap, and it's getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. We can store as much data as we want, terabytes of data, without having to do, as long as we can crunch data in real time. But based on our costing and our models, if we sell enough units, our margins will cover the technology infrastructure growth and needs in tandem. So one won't outrun the other is our model. The subscription will basically increase our gross profit margins on the other side.
How long do you think you would need to store the data for any one given user? Because
So technically, we need to store it for what we call an actionable period, which is typically the data has value in about 6 to 12 days. Meaning if a doctor wants to refer back to say what happened in the house at that time, so did something happen? So that's our sort of our actionable period. But we will store the data for as long as we want, especially anonymized data, just so we can study and train our algorithms.
What age do you think people are going to start? So your customer is the children,
Yes.
but what age are their parents when they start, or has your research shown when they start using a CareAlert system? Like, what are you expecting? Is it 70? Is it 80? Is it
No,
95?
so we think if, at least what we are thinking is when they're in their early to mid 60s is a good time when medical conditions begin to start becoming a problem. And early onset, for example, if they have surgery and you need to, if they start having surgery, they have medical procedures, that's a good time. So we think early 60s to mid 60s is a good time to introduce it so that you can achieve the goal of keeping them in their house longer without displacing them, and at the same time dramatically reducing the cost of care, which otherwise is crazy, right? So if you have post-op care, if you move, the people don't move them to the house because there's nobody to take care of them, so they keep them in the hospital. That's 3 days of extra cost of care, which is really high.
and even assisted living is so expensive.
Yeah, assisted living is expensive for a reason. I mean, you look at the market, that industry is growing like unbelievably crazy because their margins are huge.
Yeah.
What does your go-to-market strategy look like when you take these and you say, okay, it's February, we're going 500, 1,000, 10,000 units?
So what we're going to do is direct marketing from our website. We are using a bunch of, we are primarily relying on Facebook marketing as a means for thing. We are using a referral model because we think this. So one of the things that we are seeing is anybody we talk to, they can relate to the product instantaneously, right? We haven't had anybody say that they say, I'll try it out because even if it doesn't work, it's still something, right? I pay $1,000 for my iPhone. I'll put a $100 product for to make sure my mom's okay. So our go-to-market is Facebook, referral marketing. We are trying to use cause marketing as a way, but we haven't really figured out how to do it, right? So for example, if there are ways we can distribute these devices to low-income households, just so you can reduce cost of Medicare or cost of care, you can help offset it. So if I work with nonprofits who are specifically dealing with that market, that's another thing we're exploring. But again, with limited resources as a startup, as a self-funded startup, there's only certain things we can do. And then obviously Amazon and every other online channel we can
Have
use.
you had discussions with insurance companies by any chance?
Yes. So we did have with Anthem, we've had some initial discussions, but they're all looking at it as, with a bunch of other devices. And so they're progressing, but they're progressing slowly. And
They're
it's
insurance companies. That's what they do.
yeah. So they're looking at, and they came up with some really interesting use cases for us. We were at so Georgia Tech has a smart home in Atlanta, and we ended up in the same house. The Anthem insurance guys and us were at this, and they started talking to us, and they wanted. So we hear this a lot from palliative care nurses and all these people who are, So yeah, we've talked to insurance companies, we've talked to assisted living facilities, independent living houses that they want to put this in, because even after moving, this is kind of how things work, right? Even after moving their parents, the assisted living facility manager told me that, look, they moved their parent here so that they can be peaceful, but still they call me every day 5 times checking if their mom's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So
I love the user-centric approach you guys are taking to this, because having worked in kind of the smart city space for a while, and obviously there's a ton of smart city activity here this week, there's so much about sensor data and data and data and data. And so many people are trying to figure out, okay, what do I do with these mountains of data? How do I parse out something that's meaningful? How do I integrate with things that actually make that usable? So I love that approach you guys are taking. I would love to talk about your team a little bit. You've mentioned your co-founder, Freydun. I would love to hear more about him and your team at large, what roles they fill and what they're bringing to the table.
So Freydun is, he's playing the role of a CEO, right? And he comes from a hardware background. He's, built many companies throughout his career, sold and done what he's always been an entrepreneur all his life, right? And then our other co-founder is Mitch, who's actually a hardware engineer, and he's worked, he's one of those hardware gurus who knows how to put hardware together, right? And so Freydun and Mitch kind of take care of the hardware side. I'm on the software side, right? I build the platform, build the software. And then we have Payman, who's actually a University of Washington professor who's part of our founding team, because he's in this space, in the smart home space. He works a lot with large companies in the Seattle area, in this area, and he's been, he's basically filling the role of R&D, looking at the market, making connections, talking to his students, his PhD students, a lot of his, so that's what he brings. And then we have Lily, who's actually Freydun's wife, who's a CRM expert who helps us with the marketing, the go-to-market approach, strategy, and all of that. Again, her mom's been the use case for us at all the time, right? So that's kind of our team. And we have our Shachan, who's Dr. Shachan, who's actually a PhD in sensor technology and material science. He's our core engineer who works with us as a team member. We have 3 other Georgia Tech grads and students who are part of our team who are doing the embedded programming and the app development and all of that. So we form a team that basically builds both hardware and the software side. So we call it the hardware platform, software platform, and then we have marketing and biz dev. And I kind of do multiple things. I've done pitches several times in the past, so I create the pitch deck and the website and all of that.
That gets me back to something you mentioned earlier, being a self-funded startup.
Yes.
I think I counted 9 people.
Yes, at least, yeah.
You're self-funding this. Yep. Is the goal to eventually raise money, or is the goal to bootstrap this thing to profitability?
So we're self-funding it, and the reason we self-fund is because in our experience that keeps you disciplined with what you do. So we don't have a fancy booth, we don't have glitzy marketing, we don't have any of that, because we technically don't see too much value with it because it attracts the wrong kind of crowd, right? Secondly, we'd love to get on an investor, but we are very picky with who we want to work with, because personally I believe in bootstrapping more than investing, raising around. But at some point we have to, simply because it's a capital intensive business. I think your question is, do we continue to be that way, or what is it, right? So our goal is to stay this way at least through the end of the year. And if we find a strategic investor, which is an overused term, and I figure that's what people say when I describe the kind of investor, is somebody who will work with us and help us, take it to the next level by bringing in value with prior expertise and not just sit on the board asking for KPIs, right? And that's a drag on time. So we're very picky about it, but we would eventually be raising a round. And so that's our goal.
And when you raise that round, are you going to be raising it as Sensors Call or as CareAlert?
I don't think it matters. So we've always thought about this. Sensor Call is a very broad company in our mind that does use cases for elders. We may go into children, right? Eventually, we might go into baby monitoring or kid monitoring. I don't know, right? There may be equipment monitoring. There may be building monitoring, right? Did somebody leave their lights on and leave and automatically turn it off? There's so many applications to it. So just being the entrepreneurial greed that we have, we don't want to shut ourselves down. So CareAlert is a brand that is specifically focused on senior care. So we would go to market with CareAlert, absolutely. And that's why if you look at our website, we removed Sensor Call, we put CareAlert, and the company is still Sensor Call Incorporated. So.
I missed this somehow. Where are you guys based?
Atlanta, Georgia.
Atlanta, that's right.
So we are based out of the Atlanta Tech Village in Atlanta, yes.
So talk to me about Atlanta and what it has meant to you to be based in Atlanta and building this company.
I've lived in Atlanta for, since 2000. Fredun's been there forever, for almost pretty much all of his life. He graduated from Georgia Tech. I went to Emory. Given all of that, Atlanta has been really good to us, just in terms of finding specific people, in terms of skills that we need, the mentors that we need, right? Unbiased, unadulterated views, which typically is very different from what I've experienced in the Bay Area or Silicon Valley or any of their places, because they look at it from a very different angle than we do. So we've kind of cut out a lot of noise, so it's helped in that way. Atlanta is a good growing ecosystem in terms of what it'll help us. Of course, there's not much in terms of hardware per se in Atlanta, but that has not stopped us from anything, right? So it's not impeded us in any way. And then as far as Atlanta goes, I think it's a great place to be, great cost of living, a lot of people moving, high diversity, we can find the skills we need. And, we got Georgia Tech, we got Emory, we got, some good universities, we got UGA, so it works for us.
This has been awesome. If people want to learn more about you or CareAlert after the show, where would you send them to?
Go to www.carealert.io or sensorcalls.com. You can also look me up on LinkedIn. That's the way to get to us.
Hey everyone, we're here at CES, and today's podcast is brought to you from the Blue Microphones podcast suite at CES 2019. You probably know Blue from their best-selling Yeti mic that's all over the internet. In fact, Jay and I built Upside on the back of the Yeti mic. This week at CES, Blue is announcing the Ember. It's a new studio XLR microphone for professional recording, YouTube production, streaming, and podcasting. It's $99. Blue offers a full range of premium USB and XLR studio mics, which we're actually recording with today. From podcasting to YouTube to music, if you're a storyteller, Blue wants to help you amplify your voice. Visit bluedesigns.com to learn more.
All right, Eric, we just spoke with Anand Krishnan, the co-founder of CareAlert. And now we're going to get into our favorite part of the show here, our deal memo.
And in our deal memo, we look at 4 questions, the majority of which are founder-centric. But for today's deal memo, I don't want to start with the founder like we usually do on Upside. I want to start with the opportunity. Jay, what did you find striking about this opportunity?
Well, it's a universal problem, I think. Depending on, I'm sure there are some countries that are still very family-centered and the parents will be taken care of by their children or live in with their children's families. So maybe it's not quite universal, but it's very near to universal. So I think that really stuck out to me. And, the boomers now are all hitting this age that this product is serving. So it's a really good time, I think, to be concerned about elder care, as there are a lot more elders, and our culture, at least here in the West, is pushing more towards work life as opposed to family life. And I assume this is a large pain point for a lot of people.
You want to hear a fascinating stat that I found?
Yep, hit me.
So according to the Global Age Watch Index in 2013, that's the source, it said in 2012, 809 million people, or about 11% of the world's population, were over 60. By 2050, estimates put it at 2 billion people over 60, which represents 22% of the world's estimated population. So the amount of people over 60 is going to double within the next, call it 30 to 40 years.
That's crazy. I didn't see that. I actually started Googling
And I did see some statistics pointing towards the year 2050. And I thought, probably shouldn't think about the year 2050 that far ahead with this device, because who knows what the technology is doing. But as a trend line, that's pretty crazy, because the number, similarly, I looked at age 65 and up because that was what I was able to find. And of the 7.7 billion global population, about 670 million is above age 65 right now, is what I found. And 42 million of that and some change is the age above 65 in the United States.
Right. So let's just take the kind of average number there, because Anand said that they wanted this product to be for people starting in their mid 60s, which is when health problems really start. So let's say that currently there's 700 million people in the world that are above 60, and let's assume that the price point is flat at $100. That gives us a $70 billion figure in terms of if this was ubiquitous. Obviously, there's a lot of discrepancy there because a lot of the people over 60 are in lower income countries, so we could probably chop that in half, and still, I think the outcome is that it's a big number.
Yeah, and he said the price point was $149 per unit currently, right?
Right, but if you're buying 5, it gets down to $99. I was taking into consideration maybe there'll be some discounts, promotions, things that get the average unit price down to about $100. Assumption on my part, just to make the math easy. I think when the math gets so big, the total addressable market number becomes kind of more of an idea that it's big and less of a number that actually matters.
Yeah, headline being it's a big number, which leads me to one of my major points I wanted to share, and that's one of the biggest questions I had from this interview, which is the go-to-market strategy. Huge market, I get that. I didn't get a clear sense of the go-to-market strategy. I mean, he said omni-channel, they're going to go direct to consumer, they're going to use Facebook ads, they'll have a referral program. I think that all makes sense. Those are all things to explore, certainly, but I still didn't feel like I had a strong sense that strategy was really dialed in and they had the people or the experience to really do that really, really well. But he did mention someone on his team that's in marketing. Maybe they are a ringer in that department. I would have loved to hear some more, here's why we're going to be able to go to market very strongly.
Like, what specifically would you have, if they would have said something like blank, you would have been more comfortable?
Well, even saying direct to consumer Facebook ads, anybody can say that. I would have liked to have heard more about, okay, well, Lily, Freydoon's wife, I think he did talk to her background a little bit. And maybe, she's sitting there and she's saying, I've got this perfect strategy laid out and I know exactly how I'm going to target what audience, in what place, what type of message I'm going to put in front of them. I know how to do A/B testing on creative, from headlines to descriptions to images. I've done it before. It's more and more expensive to do digital strategy. That's what we came away from the Somersault interview hearing so many times from Karen and from Lori. While it's still a very, very effective way to target people, it's getting more and more expensive because it's just, there are more people in the game. It's easier for those people. So I don't know. I just didn't get like a lot of confidence from his answer, whether I'm reading into it too much or not.
So I would agree that it felt a little nebulous. That being said, I think the Facebook kind of clue in is pretty key here, because I think Facebook's fastest growing demographic is over 55 years old. So it's kind of that sandwich generation right now for people who have parents, but they also have children. And Facebook is kind of like the growing hub of that.
Do you think that the user of this, not the customer, I assume the customer a lot of times is going to be the caretaker. Do you think the user of this is going to opt in? And I ask because watching my grandmothers go into assisted living, they did not want to go into assisted living. But on the other hand, with CareAlert here, this seems like something that they can use as sort of their own method of convincing their caretaker that'll let them continue living in their own home.
So this kind of plays into my question on the go-to-market strategy, which is partnerships. I think that this product is like rife for partnerships, because the first time that anyone really questions someone living independently, actually there's probably 2 times. One, when their spouse dies. So the idea that there could be a partnership with maybe funeral homes, when you have a spouse die and say, hey, your mom just passed away, your dad just passed away, the other one's living by themselves. Here's a really cheap product that can help extend their life living independently. Or 2, the other time is when they fall for the first time, or they go to the hospital for the first time, or something happens at home that they have to go and do some sort of rehab. They break an arm, they whatever. And that, in that context, you can have that discussion, right? So children, siblings have to have a really tough discussion about what to do with their parents when they go to the hospital for the first time, they go to rehab for the first time. Do they go back and they live independently? They outfit the house with all these ADA compliant things. Do they put them in assisted living? How's the money all work out? All of this, if there was an option that could give more comfort to the idea of going back and living independently, that might be another place. So the two areas of partnership that I could see are funeral homes, targeted funeral home partnerships, and assisted living, or probably rehab would be the more specific side of the assisted living space, elderly rehab.
Yeah, I was thinking about this from an incentive alignment perspective. I don't think that assisted living facilities will be easy partners in this because you're directly competing with their customers, essentially. So I would potentially see it within doctors' offices too. I agree with rehab. I agree with funeral homes. I could also see it at doctors' offices, especially if CareAlert starts working with insurance companies as customers, which I think also is kind of a no-brainer, given that there is a bent towards preventative care as opposed to, reactive care.
I think that's the harder sell, though. I think when you, how old's your dad?
64.
Could you imagine going to your dad right now and saying, hey, we need to put this around your house so I can monitor you?
No, but also, if he was living alone, if my mom wasn't there for some reason, I think he might be open to it. But also that's because he's seen his brothers and his mom go through this. So I don't know. It would definitely be a tough conversation.
Right. I think that the independent side of things is interesting. And I don't know. I guess this is a question I don't have answered, is if they said that when people get in their 60s, that's when they want to start putting it in the houses. But if they're living with someone else, is that even a target customer? I don't know. So how that relates to insurance is that the user might be stubborn or not want this kind of preventative monitoring system in their house. And they might want to wait for something to where it becomes reactionary, because we're humans and that's what we do. But a doctor might want to prescribe that because the insurance company financially incentivizes them to get more and more people onto this system.
That makes some sense. Now I understand what you're saying about preventative as it relates to insurance and that being a hard sell to the end user. What did you think about the revenue model here?
Pure hardware is tough. I think that it's the exact same model as the Amazon Echo, where they sell hardware and they hope that everyone gets on it. The difference is that the Amazon Echo has an ecosystem behind it. I don't know that there's going to be an ecosystem behind CareAlert.
I don't think there is either. I do like that it is just hardware, because for the users of this product, I think that's I just think it's a good integration into the home in this form. I really liked Anand's perspective on, we want this to fade away into the home. We want this to be extremely non-invasive and just work. I like that a lot.
Yeah, it kind of fits their theme. It's from an engineering perspective, non-invasive, from a lifestyle perspective, non-invasive, and from a financial perspective, non-invasive. You don't see it every month on your bank account statement.
I just think they're leaving something on the table. First of all, from their cost perspective, not only are they developing and selling and then maintaining hardware. I mean, I guess they're probably not maintaining it. They're probably asking them to go buy another unit. But they're developing and selling hardware. They're also developing a mobile app that they have to keep up to date to work with every smartphone update that comes out. And if they're keeping track of all of these data points, which again, he said that the usability window is something like, I think he said 6 days or 12 days or something. They could delete historical data, but they're not going to in the immediate term because it's going to make their algorithm smarter. So their storage costs, yes, storage is pretty cheap, but that storage cost will scale disproportionately with the unit sales. So to me, I don't know why somebody wouldn't pay a subscription amount for the mobile app. I don't know. I think they're leaving something on the table. And I think he said they wanted to keep the bar really low to get into homes, but I still think that there is more opportunity there.
I guess one thing we didn't ask about directly is their margins, and because that's going to inform this answer. So I did a quick search. If you go on Alibaba, you can find a infrared, cryoelectric, motion sensor module for 93 cents. So if they have 8 sensors and say that they have the best version, and what I can find is like that's $5 each, then they have the best version that's $40 of like hardware cost plus the shell they build. Call that another $20. Like worst case scenario, they're at a $60 like unit cost, and I would guess it's lower than that. So maybe because the tech isn't evolving so quickly and isn't changing so much, which is a question I asked Anand, and the costs are so low, they can have a really healthy margin to build out all of that.
Yep, could be. Okay, I want to transition here a little bit and talk about the team here behind CareAlert. Obviously, we spoke with Anand. I really liked his background, given that he has 18 years of experience at IBM. He's been a serial founder before, so has Freydune. They've bootstrapped this company to this point, which I think is a fortunate position to be in. And I really like that about this team, is that they have that ability to enjoy that fortunate position because of past success and because they're a veteran team.
What do you think about the idea that in order to be a great investor, like a great venture capital investor, you have to start a business? We heard it from Corbett. Do you think it works the other way? To start a great business, it's easier if you've already been an investor?
No, I don't think so. I mean, maybe if you had no prior business experience, because you're going to learn some things. You're going to learn some pricing dynamics. And I think there are things that you pick up from being an investor that sure, maybe it will make it easier, but I don't know if it's going to make it easier or better than if you were in industry in whatever company you're starting.
Fair. I'm just curious because this is the first time we've had a founder on who had previous investment experience as well as founding experience.
I mean, I think it's a net benefit for sure. Would I look for a founder and say I would prefer my founder to have been formerly a venture capitalist or formerly a practitioner in the industry that he's creating this company around? I would probably say the latter. Now, Anand is somewhere in the middle of that, which I think is great.
Yeah, I completely agree. I guess my take on Anand is that he seems to have a ton of experience. He seems to really care about this idea. He seems to be willing to put some skin in the game, put his money where his mouth is. They didn't go out and just raise a third-party seed. They put their own money behind it. They put their own reputation behind it. In general, I'm a big fan.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like he has a lack of businesses or projects to focus on. So the fact that he's choosing to spend time on CareAlert, I think is a good sign to me. I like that it came from a need that Freydune and his wife, Lily, felt firsthand. And I like that they came at it from the standpoint of, we have this sensor technology, we're not going to work on it until we have a use case. Then they actually found a use case and now they're solving for it, as opposed to trying to work totally backwards.
Yeah, I do like that, where it's, we have sensors, let's find a use case, versus here's an idea, let's find the technology that kind of fits it. Because you can tell they definitely scoured for a little bit more than just this elder care dimension. They just happened to find it and happened to know about the technology and paired the two.
And probably worth noting, if this goes well, even if it doesn't go well, they do still have a portfolio of other use cases that Anand kept sort of alluding to with the sensors. And that's why CareAlert is a brand under Sensors Call, is because Sensors Call is meant to house different use cases using sensors. So, Eric, to wrap this up, what are you looking for 6 to 18 months from now from CareAlert?
So they have currently in market 25 devices. And my biggest shadow is this idea that, like, is there anything that it does better than a camera monitoring system? Because the average consumer is going to think, okay, I want to monitor my parents. And the hurdle that CareAlert is going to have to get over is the immediate connection between a camera monitoring system and monitoring your parents, and kind of training them that this is a better way to do it. So I'd love to hear feedback as they roll out 50, then 100, then 500, then 1,000, like Anand said, on initial customer buying experience and what that's like. Are they educating people to say, hey, this is a better, minimally invasive way to monitor? I think the idea makes a lot of sense once it gets explained to you, but my intuition about monitoring is that there has to be a camera. And I think that most consumers will think the same way.
Interesting. I'm looking pretty much purely at sales. Given that they're
You love the, what are you looking for in 6 to 18 months? Revenue.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're actually launching in February. They have sort of this beta or alpha program right now where they have the 25 units out. But he said that they're launching publicly in February. So I agree with you in that I want to see what the response is, and I'm looking in terms of revenue and what they're learning about their customer. I think I was maybe a little too critical on the marketing aspect, but in 6 to 18 months, they should also really learn what's working well for them from a marketing perspective, and I'm really interested to hear that as well.
Awesome. So Jay, if people want to interact with this episode, where can they do that?
If you guys have thoughts on CareAlert, please tweet at us at UpsideFM, or you can email us hello@upside.fm. And if you enjoy this episode, please go to iTunes and leave a review. It really helps us in bringing on high-quality guests for the show. We'll talk to you next week.
That's all for this week. Thanks for listening. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's guest, so shoot us an email at hello@upside.fm or find us on Twitter @UpsideFM. We'll be back here next week at the same time talking to another founder in our quest to find upside outside of Silicon Valley. If you or someone you know would make a good guest for our show, please email us or find us on Twitter and let us know. And if you love our show, please leave us a review on iTunes. That goes a long way in helping us spread the word and continue to help bring high-quality guests to the show. Eric and I decided there were a couple things we wanted to share with you at the end of the podcast, and so here we go. Eric Hornung and Jay Klaus are the founding parties of the Upside podcast. At the time of this recording, we do not own equity or other financial interest in the companies which appear on this show. All opinions expressed by podcast participants are solely their own opinion and do not reflect the opinions of Duff & Phelps LLC and its affiliates, Unreal Collective LLC and its affiliates, or any entity which employ us. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. We have not considered your specific financial situation nor provided any investment advice on this show. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
Never mind, bro, that can't be matched. I'm lighting it on fire, used to run victory laps, and still I'm not even tired. It's all about the timing, yeah, that's what they say. Well, I'ma keep on rhyming, find a way and get it done.